My name is Angela Carter. At my husband's funeral, my phone in my handbag rang. The message read, "Don't look at the coffin. Look behind you." I turned around and was terrified when I saw the shadows of someone standing at the edge of the cemetery in Boston. My heart slammed against my ribs. The rain had just stopped, but a cold chill ran down my spine as those two dark figures lingered there, half hidden by the trees. Who were they? Why were they watching me on this day of all days? I gripped the phone tighter, my fingers turning white. Everything around me blurred: the black suits, the quiet murmurs, the closed casket that held Thomas. But that message and those shadows pulled me out of the fog. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. I took one shaky step forward, then another, my mind racing with questions I couldn't voice yet. This wasn't supposed to happen, not here, not now. If you're watching this, hit that like button right now if you've ever gotten a message that changed everything in a single second. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happened next. And drop a comment below. What would you do if you received a message like that at your husband's funeral? 2 days after the funeral, I drove out of Boston toward the old stables on the outskirts. The quiet roads gave me time to think about everything that had shifted in a single moment. My hands still trembled slightly on the steering wheel when I finally parked near the weathered wooden building that had stood empty for years. I stepped inside, the faint smell of old hay and damp wood surrounding me. A figure shifted in the dim light near the back wall. "Mom," came a low, careful voice. I stopped moving completely. Kevin Carter, my son, stood there looking far thinner than the last time I had seen him. His face was partly hidden under a worn baseball cap, and the 5 years away had left clear lines of exhaustion around his eyes, along with a new hardness in his jaw. Yet there was a sharp determination in the way he held himself, as if every second counted. Just behind him, another man shifted his weight from one foot to the other, my husband's brother, Marcus Reed. I had not expected him to be part of this meeting at all, and the sight of both of them together sent my pulse racing in a new way. Kevin spoke first, keeping his voice low and urgent while glancing occasionally toward the open doorway. "I didn't disappear because I wanted a new life or because I was guilty of anything. Your husband Thomas discovered something dangerous at Mills Construction. Robert Mills and his inner circle were moving dirty money through multiple layers of fake construction contracts that looked completely legitimate on paper. They put my name on several key documents that I never signed or even saw in person. When Thomas started asking direct questions about the discrepancies during late-night reviews, the situation escalated faster than anyone expected. Someone made sure he wouldn't survive long enough to expose the full scheme. I chose to go into hiding so I could collect real proof without putting the rest of the family in immediate danger. Any earlier contact would have only made things worse and put targets on all of you. I stood there absorbing his words one by one, my thoughts spinning rapidly to make sense of the picture he was painting piece by piece. The weight of what he described pressed down on me as I tried to imagine Thomas involved in such a dangerous discovery. Marcus remained quiet for a few moments longer, his arms crossed tightly before he finally spoke up with a measured tone. Thomas shared some fragments with me in the weeks before everything fell apart. I tried to convince him to step back and let someone else handle the growing concerns, but he believed he could fix it quietly from inside the company without raising alarms. That's why I'm standing here now. Kevin contacted me quietly last week through a secure channel. The two of us agree that the full truth has to surface, no matter how messy the process becomes or how many relationships it might strain. Kevin reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small flash drive, placing it carefully in my open palm, while making sure our fingers barely touched. Everything on here is only a starting point. Copies of the forged signatures, several internal emails that mention large unexplained transfers, and records of payments that simply don't add up to any real project costs. But this alone won't finish the job or bring anyone to account. We still need stronger connections between the accounts, more original documents, and perhaps statements from people willing to talk. Robert Mills keeps a close watch on the house and anyone who was close to Thomas. You have to watch every single step you take and be extremely selective about who you bring into this circle. For nearly an hour, we remained in that dusty space, our voices kept deliberately soft so they wouldn't carry outside. Kevin went into greater detail about how the company routinely routed enormous sums through shell companies that appeared on the books as legitimate building suppliers and subcontractors for major projects around the city. Thomas had begun noticing missing funds that reached well into the millions of dollars across several quarters, and his persistent questions had clearly threatened the entire carefully built operation. Marcus added specific names of several mid-level managers who had seemed unusually nervous during recent meetings, and who might have assisted in covering the tracks or altering records at the last minute. I asked questions in between, trying to understand how something like this could have been hidden for so long right under our noses. At one point, I asked Kevin directly why he had stayed away for so long without sending even a single message. He glanced toward the open doorway for a second, his shoulders tensing before answering with quiet intensity. I convinced myself that staying completely invisible would keep the pressure away from you, Renee and little Victoria. I thought creating real distance would protect everyone from any fallout. But once Thomas passed under those suspicious circumstances, I realized that continued silence was no longer an option if we wanted any chance at justice. Catching sight of you from afar at the service pushed me to take the calculated risk of reaching out. Marcus gave a slow nod, his expression remaining serious and guarded. This family has already lost enough without adding more layers of misunderstanding. Renee and Victoria deserve to know the real story, instead of carrying around false blame about their father and brother for years to come. The last thing we need is more division when we should be standing together against what really happened. As we prepared to leave the stables one by one at staggered intervals to avoid drawing any unwanted attention, Kevin gave me one final firm warning while looking me straight in the eyes. Stay away from the police for now and avoid any official channels. We cannot afford any leaks or premature moves until the evidence is completely airtight and cross-checked. I will find a safe way to reach you again when the time is right, and we have more pieces in place. In the meantime, act as normal as possible at home. I returned to the car and headed back toward the city while the afternoon light began to soften into early evening. The small flash drive rested heavy inside my coat pocket like an anchor pulling me toward an uncertain path. Countless questions continued to turn over steadily in my mind. Questions about the kind of man Thomas had truly been at work behind the scenes, about the true reach and power of Mills construction in the region, about how I had missed any signs of trouble in our daily conversations, and about just how far this hidden trouble had already extended into every part of our daily lives without any of us noticing sooner. The drive back felt longer than usual as I replayed every word from the meeting. When I finally pulled into the driveway of our house on the quiet suburban street, the familiar building felt strangely altered, as though the walls themselves now sensed the deep uncertainty and hidden weight that hung over everything waiting to unfold. I sat in the car for a long minute before stepping out, knowing that nothing would be the same from this point forward. The next morning, while my granddaughter Victoria was still asleep upstairs, I began going through the boxes in Thomas's home office. The flash drive from the stables sat on the desk beside me as I opened drawer after drawer. Papers, old contracts, and handwritten notes filled the space. I worked methodically, scanning each page for anything that matched what Kevin had described. One folder caught my attention immediately. Inside were several agreements for large construction projects in the Boston area. The signatures at the bottom looked familiar, but something felt off. I compared them to samples of Kevin's handwriting that I kept in another file. The differences were subtle yet unmistakable, slight variations in the pressure and loops that no one would notice unless they were looking closely. These documents carried Kevin's name, but they were not his. Further down in the same stack, I found printed email chains between Thomas and several executives at Mills Construction. In one thread, Thomas questioned a series of payments totaling over $2 million that had been routed through a supplier called Apex Materials. The replies were short and defensive, insisting the transactions were standard. Thomas had replied with a single line demanding full documentation. That was dated only 3 weeks before he passed away under suspicious circumstances. My pulse quickened as I continued searching. Another set of records showed transfers to offshore accounts disguised as equipment purchases. The amounts were large and frequent, always just below thresholds that might trigger automatic reviews. I photographed each page with my phone, making sure the flash drive was backed up with these new finds. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made me pause. Renee, my daughter, appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed and her expression tight. She had been quiet since the funeral, but the tension in her posture was new. "Mom, what are you doing in here so early? You've barely slept since the service. And why is Dad's office looking like this?" I closed the folder slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just sorting through some of your father's work things. There are loose ends that need attention." Renee stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she glanced at the papers spread across the desk. "Loose ends? Or are you digging into something else? You've been acting strange ever since the funeral. Kevin's been gone for years, and now you're spending hours in here like you're hunting for ghosts. If there's something about Dad or the company, you should tell me instead of shutting me out." Her words carried an edge that stung. I wanted to share everything Kevin had revealed, but the warning about watching every step held me back. This isn't the time, Renee. There are things I need to understand first. For all of us, including Victoria. She shook her head, frustration clear in her voice. That's exactly what Dad used to say when he came home late from work. Not now, it's complicated. Look where that got us. If you're keeping secrets, it only makes everything worse. Before I could respond, the sound of a car engine outside drew my attention to the window. A dark sedan I didn't recognize had parked across the street. The driver sat motionless behind the wheel facing our house. My stomach tightened. It could have been nothing, but after everything Kevin and Marcus had said, the timing felt too deliberate. I turned back to Renee, forcing a calm I didn't feel. Please take Victoria to the park later if the weather holds. I have a few more things to finish here. Renee hesitated, clearly wanting to push further, but she finally nodded and left the room. Alone again, I copied more documents onto the flash drive and hid the originals in a different drawer. The weight of suspicion grew heavier with each new page. Questions about how deeply Thomas had been involved, whether he had tried to stop it, or had been pulled in further, kept circling in my mind. By midday, the office was back in order on the surface, but the new information burned in my thoughts. I needed professional help to make sense of it all. The name of a lawyer Thomas had mentioned once came to mind, Diane Ellis. She had handled some of his earlier contract work. Contacting her seemed like the next logical step, even if it carried risks. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I found in an old contact list. The call connected after 2 rings. This is Diane Ellis. Diane, this is Angela Carter, Thomas's wife. I need to speak with you about some documents I found. It's urgent and related to Mills Construction. There was a brief pause on the line. I understand. We should meet in person. There's a small cafe downtown at 2 o'clock. Come alone and bring whatever you have. I agreed and ended the call. The dark sedan was no longer across the street when I checked again, but the uneasy feeling remained. Renee's suspicion and the possible surveillance outside only added to the pressure building around me. Whatever Thomas had uncovered, it was clear the consequences were still unfolding, and I was now standing directly in their path. That afternoon, I left the house and drove downtown to meet lawyer Diane Ellis at the small cafe we had agreed upon. The place was quiet with only a few customers scattered at corner tables. I spotted her immediately, a woman in her late 40s with sharp features and a professional navy blazer. She rose as I approached and extended her hand. Angela Carter, she said, her voice calm but direct. I'm Diane Ellis. Thomas spoke of you often when we worked together on his earlier contracts. Please sit down. We ordered coffee and waited until the server moved away. I kept my voice low as I began describing the situation in careful terms. Diane, I found documents that don't add up. Thomas was questioning large payments at Mills Construction. I need your help to understand what this means and what steps to take next without drawing unnecessary attention. Diane listened without interrupting, her expression growing more focused with each detail I shared about the suspicious transfers and the way questions from Thomas had been brushed aside. She asked precise questions about dates, names of executives, and specific project references, jotting notes on a legal pad she pulled from her bag. Thomas was thorough, she said at one point. He once asked me to review a side agreement years ago because something felt wrong in the numbers. I advised caution then, but he pushed forward anyway, believing he could handle it internally. This sounds like a continuation of the same pattern, only much larger in scale and far more organized. She explained at length how corporate fraud cases like this often involved layered structures designed to look completely legitimate on paper. Shell companies inflated invoices for materials that were never delivered and payments routed through multiple accounts. It's common in the construction industry because projects are complex, timelines are tight, and oversight from external auditors can be lax if the right people are involved. If Thomas discovered the true scale of the operation, it would explain why things escalated so quickly. The key is building a solid chain of evidence that connects the dots without alerting the wrong people too soon, or triggering any defensive moves from the top. We spent over an hour going through the information I had brought in printed copies, spreading them carefully across the table. Diane pointed out several red flags I had missed earlier: inconsistencies in project timelines versus payment dates, repeated references to a consultant who appeared on multiple documents but had no verifiable office address or public record, and unusual patterns in approval signatures that suggested rushed processes. This consultant name keeps showing up in different contexts, she noted. It could be a front for moving funds. I can start making discreet inquiries through my network of contacts in corporate law, but we must move carefully. One wrong call or email, and the entire thing could disappear or turn against us in unexpected ways. At one moment, Diane paused, her tone softening slightly as she looked directly at me. Thomas trusted me with sensitive matters before. He mentioned once during a late meeting that if anything ever happened to him unexpectedly, I should look out for the family's interests. I didn't think it would come to this kind of conversation. There's a twist here. I represented one of the smaller subcontractors on a related project a few years back and saw similar irregularities in their books. That's why I agreed to meet you so quickly today. This might be bigger than just Mills Construction and could involve other firms in the region as well. I felt a mix of relief and new worry as she spoke, the weight of her words settling in. Having someone with her level of experience and knowledge on my side made the situation feel less overwhelming and isolated, yet it also highlighted how deeply the problem might run through the company, and possibly beyond. Diane then outlined a detailed plan for the coming days. She would review everything thoroughly in her office, cross-check public records and financial filings, and prepare a confidential summary report that could serve as a foundation for further action. We agreed to avoid phone calls or emails for any sensitive updates, and to meet again in a few days at a different location to minimize any patterns that could be noticed. Before we stood to leave, Diane gave me a serious look across the table. Angela, whatever Thomas uncovered, it clearly threatened someone's livelihood and power structure. Stay vigilant at all times. Don't discuss this with anyone else until we have much stronger footing and clearer next steps. I'll reach out through a secure method when I have something concrete to share. I thanked her sincerely and watched as she gathered her notes and left the cafe, first blending into the afternoon foot traffic outside. I waited a few minutes longer, scanning the street through the window to ensure nothing seemed unusual before stepping outside myself. The meeting had given me clearer direction and a professional ally, but it also added new layers of caution and awareness about the risks involved. The questions about Thomas's exact role in the events, the true extent of the scheme, and who else might be connected continued to occupy my thoughts as I drove away from downtown toward home. Back home later that evening, the house was quiet with only the usual sounds of the neighborhood filtering in. I stored the remaining copies in a secure spot away from obvious places and reviewed my own notes from the conversation with Diane. Her insights had shifted my understanding significantly. This was not a simple accounting error or oversight, but something deliberate, well-protected, and potentially widespread. The path ahead felt narrower and more complicated, yet it also felt necessary if any real answers were to emerge. I knew the next steps would require even more care and precision, especially with family tensions already present and the possibility of unknown eyes watching from a distance. 3 days after Diane was hospitalized, I met Anna Brooks at a secluded bench in Boston Common. The park was busy with afternoon walkers, but we chose a spot away from the main paths where conversations could stay private. Anna arrived wearing a simple coat and carrying a notebook, her journalist instincts making her scan the area before sitting down. "Angela Carter," she said quietly as she settled beside me. "I'm Anna Brooks. Diane reached out to me before things went wrong. She mentioned you had sensitive information involving Mills Construction. Tell me what you can." I spoke carefully, sharing the core concerns without revealing every detail yet. Anna listened intently, asking targeted questions about the scale of the financial movements, any connections to Robert Mills, and how the irregularities first came to light. She explained how her investigative work had touched on similar corporate cases in the construction sector before. These schemes often rely on silence and compartmentalization. If your husband Thomas started connecting the pieces, it would have made him a direct threat. My role is to help verify and amplify the facts through credible channels while protecting the sources involved as much as possible. We discussed how to strengthen the evidence safely over the next hour, going back and forth on different approaches. Anna suggested cross-referencing public filings with the materials I had access to, while emphasizing the need for multiple independent sources to make the story credible. She mentioned her contacts in financial reporting who could analyze patterns without immediate exposure. The goal is to build a narrative that holds up under scrutiny from any angle. One leak too early and the key players will scatter or counterattack through legal pressure and public relations teams. We have to be methodical and patient at every stage. Marcus Reed joined us midway through the meeting, approaching from a side path with cautious steps. I had arranged the introduction because his perspective added another layer to the picture. "This is my husband's brother, Marcus Reed," I said. "He has additional context from conversations with Thomas in the final months. Marcus nodded and contributed what he knew about internal company dynamics, including rising tensions during board meetings, unusual executive travel schedules, moments when Thomas had expressed private doubts about certain projects, and subtle changes in atmosphere at the office. His input helped fill gaps, but it also stirred new questions about his own proximity to the events, and whether he had been kept at arm's length deliberately or had chosen to stay on the edges. Anna took notes, steadily probing gently for consistency across our accounts without pushing too hard in any single direction, making sure every piece fit logically. As the conversation deepened, my phone vibrated with a message from Renee. She wanted to know why I was out again so soon and whether I was hiding more from the family after the funeral. The text carried clear frustration and a hint of accusation, reflecting the growing divide at home and the way trust was eroding day by day. I replied briefly to keep the peace for now, but the exchange highlighted how suspicion was spreading within our own circle and making everyday interactions more strained and difficult to navigate. Victoria's innocent questions about her grandfather during breakfast only added to the emotional weight I carried silently while trying to maintain a normal routine for her sake. Anna proposed a concrete strategy for controlled disclosure that balanced speed with safety. She would prepare background research on Mills Construction's recent projects and overall financial health, looking for discrepancies that aligned with our findings and could be verified independently. We can use this to create a detailed timeline that shows the progression of events from the first questionable payments to the point where Thomas raised concerns. But we need to coordinate timing carefully. A premature story could endanger everyone involved and destroy any chance of real accountability in the long run. Marcus expressed genuine concern about the risks to the younger generation, his voice carrying real worry. Renee is already questioning everything you do, and Victoria doesn't need to grow up in the middle of this kind of storm. We have to find a way to protect them while still pursuing the truth. The family has already been through enough without adding more uncertainty and fear into their daily lives. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours as we mapped out possible next actions in detail, including secure ways to share additional documents through encrypted channels and potential interviews with former employees who might speak off the record if approached correctly, and with proper safeguards. Anna stressed the importance of documentation and backup copies stored in multiple safe locations away from the house. Journalism in cases like this requires patience and verification at every step. One solid piece at a time builds an unbreakable case that can withstand legal challenges and public doubt. Before parting, Anna gave me her direct contact method for urgent updates and reminded me to stay low. Act normal in your daily routines. I'll compile what we have so far and suggest the best path forward in our next discussion. In the meantime, be aware of your surroundings at all times and trust your instincts if something feels off. I left the park with a clearer sense of alliance, but also heightened awareness of the delicate balance we were maintaining between gathering information and protecting those closest to me. The involvement of Anna brought professional support and new possibilities for exposure, while Marcus's presence complicated family loyalties in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Renee's growing distrust and the constant need to shield Victoria from the unfolding events created additional pressure that weighed on every decision I made from morning until night. The situation was expanding beyond a single company issue into a complex web of relationships and long-term consequences that demanded careful navigation at every single turn if we hoped to see any form of justice. I had no other choice left. I drove to the old church on the outskirts of Boston as the sun began to set. The building stood quiet and mostly empty, its stone walls offering a temporary sense of shelter. Anna Brooks had helped arrange the technical setup, and a small camera was already positioned on a simple stand inside the side room. I sat down, took a deep breath, and started the live stream on the secure platform Anna had prepared. My voice came out steady, despite the pounding in my chest. My name is Angela Carter. My husband Thomas passed away under suspicious circumstances a short time ago. What I am about to share is the result of weeks of careful gathering of information. Mills Construction, led by Robert Mills, has been involved in moving large sums of money through fake contracts and shell companies. My son Kevin Carter was used as a name on documents he never signed. Thomas discovered the pattern and paid a heavy price for asking questions. I continued speaking directly to the camera, laying out the timeline without exaggeration. I described how payments for non-existent materials had been routed through multiple accounts, how approvals had been rushed, and how warnings from inside the company had been ignored. The numbers I mentioned were specific sums reaching millions of dollars across several quarters. I showed scanned documents on screen, blurring sensitive personal details but keeping the key patterns visible. Anna had prepared clear visuals that highlighted the inconsistencies without revealing sources prematurely. As the live stream continued, comments began flooding in. Some viewers expressed shock, others asked for more proof, and a few accused me of spreading rumors. I kept my focus reading a prepared statement about the need for transparency in corporate practices. This is not about revenge. It is about accountability. Families should not have to suffer because someone chose profit over integrity. Marcus had stayed nearby for support, monitoring the chat from another device. He sent a quick message when he noticed unusual activity from accounts linked to the company. The pressure was building in real time. Renee had seen the notification and sent several messages asking what I was doing, her words growing more urgent. I could not respond during the stream, but the family tension added another layer of weight to every word I spoke. The stream lasted 45 minutes. I answered selected questions from viewers, always sticking to facts and avoiding speculation. Anna had advised keeping the tone measured and professional to maintain credibility. Toward the end, I made a direct appeal. If you have information about similar practices in the industry, contact trusted authorities or journalists. Silence only protects those who benefit from it. When I ended the broadcast, the room felt heavier. Anna called immediately to confirm the stream had been recorded and shared safely across platforms. She noted that major news outlets were already picking up the signal and requesting verification. The response was faster than we had anticipated, with shares climbing quickly. Robert Mills and his team would see it soon if they had not already. The live stream had crossed a point of no return, forcing the issues into the open where they could no longer be contained quietly. I sat in the quiet church for a few moments longer, thinking about the consequences that would follow. Kevin's safety, Renee's trust, and Victoria's future all hung in the balance now that the information was public. The drive back toward the city felt different. Every passing car seemed more noticeable, and the usual sounds of Boston traffic carried new meaning. The decision to go public had been difficult, but staying silent would have meant accepting the hidden actions without challenge. The coming days would test how strong the evidence truly was, and how the system responded when light was shown on dark corners. 1 week after the live stream, my phone rang constantly with calls from unknown numbers and messages from reporters. I sat in the living room of our house in Boston watching the news updates on the television. Federal agents had moved quickly once the information became public. Robert Mills was taken into custody at his office, facing multiple charges related to financial crimes and conspiracy. The court documents listed systematic movement of funds through fake construction contracts with losses reaching millions of dollars. The FBI confirmed they had opened a full investigation based on the evidence presented. Mills Construction's assets were frozen pending review, and several executives were also questioned. Public records showed the company's stock dropping sharply, with investors pulling out as the story spread across financial news outlets. Robert Mills appeared in court for the initial hearing, his face tense as the judge set high bail conditions. The prosecution presented enough preliminary evidence to keep the case moving forward without delay. Kevin Carter, my son, was officially cleared of any wrongdoing. The forged signatures were proven false through forensic analysis, and his long absence was now understood as self-protection. He returned home quietly, but the reunion carried no celebration. Too much had changed. Renee kept her distance, her trust in the family fractured by the weeks of secrecy and suspicion. She focused on caring for Victoria, limiting conversations to practical matters about the household. I made the decision to separate completely from the extended family ties connected to Thomas's side. Marcus Reed faced his own scrutiny for his proximity to the company, though no charges were filed against him. The relationships that once formed the foundation of our lives had been strained beyond repair. I changed my contact information and limited any further communication, choosing to move forward independently with Kevin and focusing on stability for Victoria. The legal process continued in the Massachusetts courts. Robert Mills pleaded not guilty at first, but as more documents surfaced and witnesses came forward, the case strengthened. He eventually accepted a plea deal that included a long prison sentence and full restitution. The court ordered the forfeiture of properties, vehicles, and bank accounts linked to the scheme. Mills Construction filed for bankruptcy, its operations shut down as creditors claimed what remained. The consequences were public, and lasting lost careers, damaged reputations, and a clear message that such actions carried real penalties under federal law. I sat with Kevin one evening after the final court updates. He spoke little about the years he had spent away, but his presence brought a quiet sense of resolution. Renee watched from this doorway, her expression unreadable. Victoria played nearby, unaware of the full weight of what had happened. The family unit that once existed no longer held together in the same way. Some bonds had broken under the pressure, and I chose not to force them back into place. Looking back on the weeks since the funeral, the path had demanded constant vigilance and difficult choices. Bringing the truth into the open had come at a personal cost, but it had also stopped the hidden actions from continuing unchecked. Justice in this country operates through evidence and legal processes, not personal vengeance. Those who built their success on deception faced accountability through investigations, trials, and financial ruin. A mother's determination to protect her children and honor the memory of her husband had set events in motion that no one could ignore. The experience taught a clear lesson. Secrets built on betrayal eventually surface, and silence in the face of wrongdoing only allows harm to spread. Real strength lies in persistence, careful gathering of facts, and trusting the system to deliver consequences when the evidence is solid. Families may not emerge unchanged, but truth provides a foundation for whatever comes next. I closed the chapter on that part of our lives, focusing instead on rebuilding with what remained and ensuring Victoria would grow up, understanding the value of integrity over convenience. The phone calls gradually slowed. The news coverage moved on to other stories. Life in Boston continued, but our household carried a new quietness, one shaped by lost revelation and the decision to move forward without looking back.